Hello, good morning. Welcome to Gaming Insight Daily for Wednesday, February 26, 2025. I'm Steve Saylor. This is your daily show of gaming news, accessibility news, or updates about my life. I have iced coffee in my PS5 mug today. Yeah. This is going to be kind of one of those ranty episodes, so strap in, because I got a lot to say about this particular news story that we're talking about. If you know about the kind of the news stories that kind of happened, they're basically I'm going to be talking about one, potentially two. Well, two kind of connected, and then one other news story if I get to it, depending on how I'm feeling. But basically, we're talking about Warner Brothers and Wonder Woman today. So I'm going to skip a lot of the housekeeping, but I do want to be able to say, if you want to be able to get some new merch from me, some accessibility merch, you can be able to go to stevesaylor.store and you can be able to pick up the some new merch there. I'd really appreciate it if you could. That would help support me directly, and it's also good. You get some cool accessibility, like actual, like comfortable, good quality merch. So yeah. All right, let us jump into the first news story. Probably the biggest news story that broke yesterday afternoon. Warner Brothers cancels Wonder Woman game and closes 3 studios. I'm reading this from IGN, written by Rebecca Valentine. Shout out to Reb, she's amazing. Warner Brothers is canceling its planned Wonder Woman game and shutting down 3 studios: Monolith Productions, Player First Games, and WB San Diego, according to Bloomberg reporter Jason Schreier. Schreier broke the news on Blue Sky today, followed by the release of a full report on Bloomberg. Shortly after Schreier's post, WB confirmed the shutdowns to Kotaku in a statement. We've had to make some very difficult decisions to structure our development studios and investments around building the best games possible with our key franchises: Harry Potter, Mortal Kombat, DC, and Game of Thrones. After careful consideration, we are closing 3 of our development studios: Monolith Productions, Player First Games, and Warner Brothers Games San Diego. This is a strategic change in direction and not a reflection of these teams or the talent that consists within them. The development of Monolith's Wonder Woman video game will not move forward. Our hope was to give players and fans the highest quality experience possible for the iconic character, and unfortunately this is no longer possible within our strategic priorities. This is another tough decision as we recognize Monolith's storied history of developing epic fan experiences through amazing games. We greatly admire the passion of the 3 teams and thank every employee for their contributions. As difficult as today is, we remain focused on and excited about getting back to producing high-quality games for our passionate fans and developed by our world-class studios, and getting our games business back to profitability and growth in 2025 and beyond. Earlier this year, another Bloomberg report suggested Wonder Woman was in trouble after rebooting and switching directions in early 2024. This came amid larger struggles at the company's gaming division, including layoffs at Rocksteady, the lukewarm reception to Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, and the shutdown of Multiverses. And even more recently, WB Games has appeared to undergo a restructuring of sorts, as longtime Games head David Haddad announced his departure from the company, and rumors circulate that the division might be sold off. Specifically, this move represents a blow to WB's DC Universe-connected gaming efforts. Notably, just yesterday, James Gunn and Peter Safran said in a presentation that it would be a couple of years, quote-unquote, before the first DCU video game. With this closure, the games industry loses 3 incredibly storied studios. Monolith Productions, which had been working on Wonder Woman, was founded in 1994 and acquired by WB in 2004. It's best known for Middle-earth: Shadow of Mordor and its sequel, Shadow of War, the former of which pioneered the lauded Nemesis system that WB successfully patented in 2021. Players First Games, a newer studio established in 2019, was responsible for Multiverses. The game was well received critically and saw large success, but underperformed relative to WB's expectations. WB San Diego, similarly, is a newer studio established in 2019 with a focus on mobile free-to-play games. These shutdowns continue a trend going back roughly 3 years of increasing games industry layoffs, project cancellations, and studio closures. In 2023 alone, it's estimated that over 10,000 game developers were laid off. That number shot up to over 14,000 in 2024, and while 2025 has seen numerous closures, the exact number of impacted individuals is hazier due to fewer companies reporting these layoffs and shutdowns or specific numbers affected. All right. I'm debating on whether to kind of like lament on the sort of you know what, I'm gonna tease this story because it is part of the of this. This is also from IGN, written by Vicky Blake. Cancel Wonder Woman was gorgeous and expansive, comic book writer who consulted on the game says. But I want to talk about obviously this story. I am pissed off. Not specifically at the unfortunate, I guess the struggles that I guess Wonder Woman had been under over the past couple of years, because that happens, especially with a franchise-like game or an IP-specific game. It is tough to nail a specific game if you've never sort of seen what that kind of IP could bring to the video game industry. Because we've never seen a Wonder Woman game, solo Wonder Woman game ever. So Monolith had the task. Excuse me, I got a cough. Sorry, I had to mute myself. They had the large. Excuse me, I got a cough again. Oh my goodness. They had the large task of trying to be able to create a great Wonder Woman game, and I can only imagine that. With them trying to be able to figure that out while seeing Rocksteady kind of fail with Suicide Squad, seeing Multiverses not really launching that super well, Gotham Knights also not like launching to critical acclaim as people had hoped. I would be shocked if no one thought a Monolith being like, oh, there's something happening, and we need to try to fix it. And that probably would imagine that they tried to do that. I am also a fan of Monolith Studios, Monolith Productions. They made one of my favorite games of all time, Matrix Online. They are well known for making great IP games. They had obviously Matrix Online, regardless of what you thought of sort of the at the time, whether it was a great game or not. It was one of my favorite games. It's what got me into the video games again. Well, not again, but it's what got me into the broadcasting industry. I'll just say that. And then obviously with Shadow of War, like basically the Lord of the Rings franchise, being able to create probably some of the best Lord of the Rings games ever with both its Shadow of Mordor and Shadow of War sequel. So Monolith Productions has been creating great games since 1994. That's amazing. But to see, here's the thing, games get canceled all the time. We don't hear about it because the video games industry is pretty secretive. So we don't know half of the games that are started and then canceled kind of midway through production before they even had a chance to announce it. So we just hear about the kind of the time difference between their studio's previous game to the next game, but we don't know what other failed projects were happening in between. You may see that, this studio took 8 years to be able to create this game. You don't know that they may have spent 2 to 3 years on a game that didn't work, and then they spent the next 5 trying to be able to create the game that eventually comes out. So unfortunately, because of how secretive the gaming industry is, we don't know half the games that are being canceled. So now, granted, yes, this Wonder Woman game, the only thing we knew about it was the one announced trailer that happened in I think it was 2021 Game Awards. And that was the only time we ever heard. That was the only time we ever heard about it or seen about it since. So regardless, okay, like the writing was on the wall, especially with the previous report that Wonder Woman was in trouble. The writing was on the wall that potentially that the Wonder Woman game could be canceled. And that's fine. Again, it sucks. It's a lot of wasted money. But hey, if you might as well cut your losses and just be like, hey, you know what? Fine, whatever. But to close the entire studio over it, that's what I take issue with. Instead of writing it off, as Warner Brothers is off to do these past few years, they just love writing off things after spending millions upon millions of dollars on projects just so they can get a tax write-off. Not even just only canceling the game, but closing the entire studio. Not even letting them be sold or go independent. No, they just decided to close the entire studio. A studio that's been around for 3 fucking decades. And to top it all off, getting off of Monolith for a second, Player First Games. They were tasked with creating a Smash Brothers-like game called Multiverses that combined all of WB's IP into this game. You had everything from Batman to Game of Thrones to Scooby-Doo to SpongeBob and even Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Wait, they weren't in there? I can't remember anymore. Anyway, all of DC properties, all of Warner Brothers IP that they owned was in this game, and by all means, it's like, okay, it wasn't necessarily a huge hit, but it was definitely a hit within the community that it had. And this was also their first game. Now, they weren't initially owned by Warner Brothers when they first started the project, but they eventually did. To only they literally. This gets my blood boiling. Like, hold on, let me bring it up here. Player First Games, a newer studio established in 2019, but they bought the studio. WB's bought the studio. Not even like, sorry, I'm spinning it like crazy. They bought the studio. Not even like less than a year ago. And to basically be like, now we're shutting that down too. Yeah, okay, like Multiverses, sure. Like their first game out the gate. Didn't really hit with sales expectation, whatever that means for WB. But I'm like, again, you can cancel it and have them be a support studio within WB. I could see that happening. Having them try to create a new project. I can see that happening. But again, to close the entire studio that just started. They only had their first game out within 5 years. From start to finish, they closed down the studio. Now, Warner Brothers Games San Diego is generally like this, like they said, it's kind of a mobile sort of studio, but it also is a sports studio. Warner Brothers has a few studios that are like in specific cities. So you got WB Montreal, WB Boston, and WB San Diego, and San Diego is kind of basically those studios are generally support studios for kind of the main ones. So whether it's Rocksteady or Avalanche or NetherRealm, that kind of thing. So those studios closing. We'll get to. So they've got basically WB has a few studios left. They have Rocksteady, WB Montreal. They have NetherRealm, they have Avalanche. So sorry, I should probably mention what those studios make. So Rocksteady makes the Arkham series. They also unfortunately made Suicide Squad, Kill the Justice League. You've got also WB Montreal, who made Gotham Knights just recently, but also was responsible for making Arkham Origins, kind of like that filler Arkham game in between when Rocksteady was making Arkham, in between Arkham City and Arkham Knight. Then you have NetherRealm, who makes Mortal Kombat and also Injustice. So basically their fighting game franchise. And Avalanche makes Hogwarts Legacy. So that was their main kind of game for WB over the recently. And that's kind of basically it. They've got a few other support studios, but that's basically it. So they've got only of those things left. Now, according to WB statements, you see them basically saying that they're only going to focus on key franchises for video games: Harry Potter, Mortal Kombat, DC, and Game of Thrones. I'm going to take the DC equation out of that and basically kind of go with what another statement that that WB has made in the past when it comes to their games. They want to make more Batman games. They don't want to make more DC projects. They want to make more Batman games because, say it with me, it's the only thing that ever made WB money. That and Harry Potter. And even then, the Harry Potter game was a fluke. Not knocking anything about the game. I've worked on the game. I did some disability representation work on that game, but I worked on Hogwarts. Like I did do some work on Hogwarts Legacy. But even the success of Hogwarts Legacy was not predicted by even WB themselves. It blew up as one of the biggest games, if not the highest selling game of 2023, beating out Call of Duty. That's saying something. So when you talk about DC, Game of Thrones, they've never really made a Game of Thrones game that actually kind of like really was anything. Like the Telltale game was kind of really it. They also have like a game that's coming out now, that's being worked on, set within the TV universe, I guess, of Game of Thrones. But that is kind of, people can sort of looking at it as a mobile game. It's not really, I guess, a mainstay kind of game within the Game of Thrones sort of franchise. So they don't really have a lot of games there. DC basically just means Batman. Mortal Kombat, NetherRealm is kind of like on their own. They get to create whatever they want with Mortal Kombat. And then Harry Potter, that's all going to be basically planted on Avalanche's lap from here on out. And you may be asking some questions. So Rocksteady had a massive failure, a highly publicized failure with Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. Now, yes, their previous success of Arkham games, it keeps that studio afloat. But here's the thing: if the rumors are true, they have been forced to try to be able to create a new Batman game, another Arkham game. Well, they've already made 3, technically 4, because Suicide Squad was considered to be in the Arkham universe. Now they're forced to make another Batman game. Why weren't they closed? They had just as big of a Monolith hadn't even got their game out the door yet, and they were canceled. Why was Rocksteady not closed? Because of a massive failure on that part. And to top it all off, what about WB Montreal? I am not saying this to be callous. I am not saying this to basically against anyone who's worked for or is currently working at those studios. I'm just trying to go by whatever WB crazy logic that they have. If you're looking at the studios to close, Warner Brothers Montreal hasn't really created a massive hit for WB. And I'm saying massive according to WB standards, because I thought that Gotham Knights was actually a pretty decent game. Didn't really get critical acclaim, but it did okay. Arkham Origins didn't really release with critical acclaim, but it became. But a lot of people sort of said it's sort of has some of the best boss battles that we've ever seen in video games, even sometimes rivaling some of the best boss battles in the Arkham series themselves. So they've had some accolades, but they have never made a great hit for WB. Why weren't they closed? Like, it doesn't make sense. By WB's own logic, they are so inconsistent with that logic that closing again, I can understand canceling a Wonder Woman game. That's fine. Cancel it. Cut your losses. Fine. It didn't work out. Fine. But to close a studio for it? I'm sorry, that's bullshit. And I know that there was actually going to be some pretty decent, even bringing the accessibility conversation is, I knew there was probably going to be some really great accessibility into it, because the former UX and UI lead of Sony Santa Monica, who worked on God of War Ragnarok, basically Mila Pavlin, who worked on the accessibility of that game, that was in charge of the accessibility of God of War Ragnarok, had moved to Monolith Studios or Monolith Productions to work on Wonder Woman. In the same position. So that's another accessible game or potential accessible game that we could have had that is now canceled. But to close the studio for 30 years. There were people that had been working there that I got to meet, one of them who had been working there since The Matrix Online, and that was mid 2000s. That's just 20 years ago. Not even talking 30 years ago when the studio started. So they had people that had been working there for 30 years. People who knew either the Nemesis system or just knew how to create great games because of the team that they had. You know how rare it is to be able to have a studio now with basically people have been with that studio for 20 plus years, 15, 20 plus years at the same studio? Extremely rare. And to see, again, and I kind of lay out all of this, kind of all the larger context around these games and these studios to basically summarize it to this. And I've been saying this for years. Warner Brothers has screwed over DC time and time again. They are the ones responsible for the failures of DC over the past 2 decades. Even further than that, going 30 years if we want to include the film franchises. Warner Brothers has screwed over DC time and time again. They don't know what the hell they are doing. Warner Brothers used to be, going into the film sort of side, they used to be a very auteur type studio or type publisher or whatever. They were always like, it's always the creative that led sort of their successes. So like a Christopher Nolan, as it were. Christopher Nolan working with Warner Brothers on the Dark Knight trilogy, like that, like they kind of like let him sort of make whatever he wanted to make because he had the pedigree of being Christopher Nolan. They used to be able to do that, but now you get someone like, say, a Zack Snyder, who created who made Man of Steel for them, and was then asked to be able to create a DC universe that basically got noted and committed to death, to the point where none of their movies made any sense anymore. They were trying to shortcut their way to an Avengers type thing with competing with Marvel, and also the constant changing of leadership all the time at WB. One person wants to be able to do this for Warner Brothers and advance their gaming side. And then this new leadership, new CEO. I don't know what we're talking about. Games of service. That's what we need to do. We need to make a whole bunch of games of service games. Get Suicide Squad, get Multiverses, get all that stuff out the door. And then that guy leaves, and then now we're left with basically like, oh no, well maybe that now we need to be able to we need to go with our biggest profitable successes. We need to go with Harry Potter. We need to go with Batman. We need to go with Game of Thrones, because that's all the gamers care about is those freaking franchises. That's all they need to know. There is no one to blame. And here's the thing. I'll even say Monolith could have had some issues. We don't know. We've seen that before. Studios could have had internal issues, or just like basically it could have been like more internal than necessarily external. But I would be remiss if I didn't say that at least a good percentage of the reason why the Wonder Woman game wouldn't have worked is because of the nitpicking of Warner Brothers. The fact that they were the gatekeepers of everything, anything that they wanted to be able to do within that game, within with regards to story, what have you, they would have had to have gone to WB, and WB is notorious for saying yes and no to the stupidest things. Warner Brothers Montreal was supposed to create a I can't remember what game they had pitched. They had pitched sort of a game to WB. I think it might have been. I don't want to say it was a Constantine game. That's the only thing that kind of come into my head right now. But they were pitching a game, and Warner Brothers said no. Why don't you work on a Flash game instead? And they did. They tried to be able to work on a Flash game, but then the movie Flash came out, and that tanked at the box office. So Warner Brothers was like, "Nah, we don't what the lesson they took from that? Like, no one cares about Flash anymore." You had a successful TV show for 9 seasons. 9 seasons of television. You had a successful Flash. You had probably one of the best interpretations of that character from Grant Gustin as Barry Allen. And yet you thought that the movie with Ezra Miller was going to do well. Because why? They had Batman. Michael Keaton was back. And apparently I heard that also they were making I don't know who was making it, but someone was making a Superman game, and WB said, nah. Like the They keep trying to tie into the movies. They keep thinking it's like, you know, if the movies don't do well, then the video games won't. And yet they all like within WB, they already have proven, because here's the thing, the Arkham Asylum games. Let me look that up real quick. I just want I can't remember. I'm blanking on the name or on the date. Okay, 2009. So Arkham Asylum was released in 2009. Okay, this is just after Batman Begins. Like in 2000, I think it was like 2005 was, I think, Batman Begins, and then 2008 was Dark Knight. Okay. Now you may think, oh, a year later, of course, you know, it makes sense. Release Arkham Asylum because, you know, everyone's hot on Batman right now. But you gotta think, at the time, WB was making Batman games that were tied to the movies. You remember the previous Batman game to Arkham Asylum was Batman Begins. It was a tie-in to the movie, and that did not do super well. So to be able to divert from the movie universe and not try to create another Christian Bale version of Batman, they created the Arkham Asylum game that basically launched a franchise that basically told the entire video game fans and industry, you can create a great superhero game, because previous to that, superhero games sucked. But Rocksteady was able to prove that it can be done if done correctly. If you have basically the same care that you put into, like, if you have the same care put into your stories without any, like, hopefully without a lot of external involvement, and just kind of trusting the team to be able to let them cook, you get some of the biggest superhero video game franchises. That literally the only other one that's been able to beat it is Marvel Spider-Man. So WB has screwed over time and time again DC Comics. I have been wanting for years DC Comics to be like, to take a page out of Marvel and be like, you know what? We're making our own now. We're making our own films. We're making our own games. We don't need WB anymore. I don't know how the hell they're going to be able to do it, because they've been WB has been entrenched with DC since the 70s for over 50 years now. I'm sick and tired of WB screwing over developers, screwing over people who are just trying to make great content, whether that's shows, movies, video games, what have you. And yes, I'm excited to see Superman this summer from James Gunn. He's the only hope I got right now that DC could turn around. But it's just, I'm so sick and tired of WB screwing over so many people, because and also you think, oh, okay, well, yeah, video games, all right, you know, that's a whole other thing. That's, you know, we're talking about, what about DC in the films? Do you remember that they canceled the Batgirl movie? Like, it was done, it was made, and they wrote it off, and they can never release it. There was going to be an Aquaman or another Aquaman game, or not Aquaman, like another Aquaman movie. There was going to be there was several other projects that were on the go, like within DC, that like movie projects that basically got canceled or filmed, and basically WB was like, nah, we're not going to release it. So I am sick and tired of the CEOs screwing over, because even if you want to think even broader, CEOs are screwing over the video game industry by tenfold just within the past few years. It's probably been brewing for a while, but just within the past few years, it has been ridiculous, the amount, and they don't get punished for it. You know who gets punished for it? The developers. CEOs get to stay in their jobs. They don't get fired, but no, developers do, because they're the ones that fall, not the CEO. It's not their CEO doesn't, like, you know, the buck doesn't stop with it, like with them. Well, I was gonna say with him, and I changed it to them, but I'm like, no, it's them. It's 100% him. And like the CEO, the buck always stops with him because it's the CEO. But they never take responsibility for it. They just take their bonuses and go on their yacht and call it a day. Oh, well, you know, it's how business works. It's how the whole thing works. Now to jump into basically the this cancel, like basically the story about other the folks who worked on it by Vicky Blake. A Cancel Wonder Woman was gorgeous and expansive comic book writer who consulted on the game says. Comic writer, this is by Vicky Blake at IGN. Comic writer Gail Simone has revealed she worked on Warner Brothers' beleaguered Wonder Woman game before it was shelved yesterday. Simone, known for being the longest-running female writer on Wonder Woman comics to date, praised the Dream Team working on the video game, insisting everyone she worked with for the now shuttered Monolith and Warner Brothers was enthusiastic and supportive. I was asked to do long-term consulting on the game, and I was thrilled to do it. It was a perfect storm of stuff I adore, Simone wrote on social media. Wonder Woman video games and one of my favorite game studios, Monolith, who produced the Game of the Year Mortar games that I was completely addicted to. The game was gorgeous and expansive. It was beautiful to look at. I'm not going to give details for a number of reasons, but every effort was made to make this not just a great game, but a great Wonder Woman game, a showpiece epic. And all of that was because of the team. Everyone who worked on it brought their A game. Programmers, artists, designers, everyone. I don't know that I've ever worked with a team that cared more about making sure the end product was perfect. It was a dream come true. Wonder Woman had a dream team, and they put their all into it, Simone concluded. They made sure it had Wonder Woman and DC lore on every aspect of the game. It was a thrill and honor to work with them. I know there's a lot of finger pointing going on, but everyone I worked with from Monolith and WB both was enthusiastic and supportive. Everyone wanted to make the best game ever. I'm not going to read through the rest of it because basically it's just repeating everything that's been happening. So you can tell that basically, like, I know she's not putting any blame on anybody, even at WB. But hearing that just breaks my heart. They put so much effort into that game. They put so much like love into it. And this is why I'm like, when you get a team that's passionate about the franchise, like let them cook, let them try to be able to make the game. We don't need, like, Warner Brothers is so enamored with they need to be able to make games that sell 30+ million copies because they need to replicate the success of Harry Potter. They think every game that they release should be of that caliber. But they don't understand how the video game is, that if you basically create maybe like 10 smaller games with smaller budgets within the IPs that that are at it. I talked to my friend Caboose yesterday. We were on a gaming podcast. We were talking about this in depth, and he said that if you pulled a book of Marvel Studios lately of what they've done within the video games, they basically kind of allowed any studio that wanted to create a Marvel game to pitch them, and then they gave them that property, and some have been successful, some have not been successful, but they were able to like spread out the IPs to any studio that wanted it, not within sort of Marvel's own sort of specific walled garden of studios. You put a DC logo on a game, that's going to sell. Maybe not necessarily 30 million copies, but it's going to sell at least well. Even if it's like each game sells like at least maybe 5 million copies, which is still a lot in today's sort of kind of landscape of video game releases. That is still like critical success is that if it sells more than 5 million copies. If they get at least 5 million sold copies of games, like smaller games that basically took less budget, that you would make up that 30 million budget no matter what. And you spent less on shorter experiences, the shorter development time, but with the same passion and dedication that you would have had because the team was passionate about this IP. I mentioned yesterday, like imagine if like Capcom had created a DC game and basically took the RE engine, take the Resident Evil team and making a Constantine game. Or imagine this, going to Bloober team or whoever's going to be making a Silent Hill game. Imagine a Silent Hill type game set in a small town where you have John Constantine trying to investigate what's happening in this town. Like, I would play the shit out of that game yesterday. All you had to do was just allow other teams to basically create whatever they wanted with the same dedication that they would, because they're passionate about that project. And if WB would have just been like, "Hey, it's yours. We'll check in every once in a while. But hey, it's yours. Go for it. Make whatever you like to make." If they would have let them cook, guaranteed we'd have a lot more successful WB games. I know I've ranted already like quite a bit now, but like it's yeah, but it just astounds me. WB is screwed over once again. Developers, screwed over a studio, screwed over fans. And I'm sick and tired of it. I know this whole entire video sounds like I'm basically like one of those like angry YouTubers or angry video game type nerds, whatever. But I'm just sick and tired of this, man. Like I'm sick and tired of developers getting the shaft every step of the way. They deserve so much better. And if you're watching this video and you got this far, and if you ever think that the developers deserved to basically for their game to be canceled and the studio to be closed, I want you to go fuck right off. Because A, you don't understand how development works, and B, you actually don't care about video games because you don't care about the people making the games that you like. And I will probably guarantee that you probably don't like pretty much any game because you think every game sucks. Well, I'm sorry for you. Boo-hoo for you. Those developers did not deserve to have their lives upended within a day. Basically, the whiplash of not only a game cancellation, but a studio closure on the same day. I guarantee they probably heard about that literally about the time that everyone else did. So there's no warning. There was no pre-warning. If you think the developers deserve that, go fuck right off. They didn't. They did not deserve that. Regardless if you thought, well, you know, they announced it and we didn't hear anything about them for years now, so of course it was in trouble. You don't know that. You don't know how the video game industry works. They didn't deserve it. They did not deserve it. And now we've got an entire studio of a couple hundred people are looking for jobs today. And that sucks. I'm sorry if for any developer who's worked on this game or worked on the games. I'm just I'm so mad for you, and I'm so sad for you at the same time. I wish you all the best of luck in finding a new place that deserves your that ultimately deserves your talent, and hopefully honors that talent, because y'all were making a great game, I can imagine, and I would have loved to have seen what you guys have built. So anyway, I've ranted long enough. Again, I was going to do another story today, but I'm like, no, this has to be it. This is literally the only thing I can think of to talk about. So thank you for listening. I feel like I kind of like screamed enough that I'm starting to feel it a little bit in my throat. I should have warmed up my voice a little bit more this morning, just in case. But thank you so much for watching and or listening. If you have any comments about any of this, please leave them in the comments down below. I'm baffled by this whole thing. Anyway. Hopefully tomorrow will be better news. I really hope so. But in the meantime, thank you so much for watching, listening. I'll see y'all tomorrow. Take care. Bye-bye.